JRPGs are known for a lot of things. Confusing plots? Yo, is that Jesus? Frustrating gameplay mechanics. Why do you take turns when I take turns? Simplicity really isn't one of them though. Not that there aren't games that do it well, such as today's topic. One of the earliest releases of the PlayStation 2, it's the story of a boy trying to put his ruined world back together, with a blend of dungeon crawling and city building. Does it have its own problems?
Perfection.
Is it still worth playing despite that? Let's find out. Kids, today we're learning about Dark Cloud. Cults, dancing, polygonal booty, like how all good things begin. The massive urn contains the dark genie that laid waste to the world hundreds of years ago, which our villains are trying to revive because this clearly can't backfire. Overlooking the dark ceremony is Colonel Flag, the man behind it all, and the greedy merchant he paid to organize it. We also have a mysterious platinum-haired man in leather watching from the shadows, and we can assume he's there because there was a quota to fill. The ritual succeeds, and with it comes the return of... oh, it's just Majin Buu. A chubby pink monster that's kind of soft in the head, who immediately complains about being hungry. He agrees to do as Flag tells him, since the Colonel was behind his release. But before they set off on their quest of world domination, he snatches up and swallows the merchant whole. Meanwhile, in No Rune Village, everyone is busy celebrating how much they love being alive, and how not on fire everything is. Our main character, a young boy named Tone, is finishing dinner at home when his friend Paige bursts in to tell him to come join her at the festival. His mother chides him for taking too long when the girl runs off without him.
She left!
Like Dad did.
The Dark Genie and Colonel Flag are watching from high above, in a really cool shot showing off the two moons. The monster begins using his sort of genocide attack, and Tone watches in horror as his home is reduced to nothing but rubble and flame. Worse than any of that, he sees the only girl his age in town about to be crushed to death, so he rushes to save her. But it's too late. The next we see of Tone, he's in a strange, shining clearing, with a voice gently calling for him to wake up, until it runs out of patience.
Wake up!
Tone awakens to a mysterious old man, who introduces himself as the Fairy King, the entity that unites all of nature's spirits. He speaks kindly to us, taking great care not to upset Tone, as he explains how half the world was destroyed in a single night. He blames men's greed for all of the pain and suffering. And also Easterners. He specifically also blames the Easterners for why everything has gone bad. Xenophobic Fairy Grandpa King tells Tone that he sees in him the potential to defeat the Dark Genie, before giving him a special stone called the Atlamilia, and returning him to where No Rune Village once was. But instead of a burnt-out ruin, it's totally empty. At the exact moment the Dark Genie would have destroyed it, the Fairy King sealed everything into Atla to keep it safe. These special spheres were then blown all over the world, and it is now our job to rebuild everything. We prepare to set off on our grand adventure, but we get a few extra lines here asking if we've done this before. On our totally legitimate PlayStation 2 console, with our completely real disc copy of Dark Cloud, is a mod. Named Dark Cloud Enhanced, it adds excellent quality of life changes and some additional content. Whenever anything from it comes up, this little enhanced sticker will appear on screen. With our only place to visit being the large submarine house left standing, we meet the mayor. It seems we are the only two people left alive, and he doesn't hesitate to hand over the key to the nearby Divine Beast Cave, so we can harass the local guardian deity about why he didn't do anything to protect us. He also loads up our inventory for our dungeon diving, and until we get a shop, we'll be living off the meager supplies he gives us. Stepping into the first floor of the dungeon, we're immediately greeted by our bug-eyed grandpa, who tells us to hold up a second so we can explain how things are going to work. Each floor is randomly generated and has a gate key we'll have to acquire from one of the monsters. It's entirely random which one is carrying it, and the only things that can make this process faster are two items every floor is guaranteed to have: the map and a magical crystal that shows us where every item and monster is. Combat in Dark Cloud, it can be a little overwhelming at first. We'll be relying on our humble dagger. Every weapon in Dark Cloud has a health meter that will drain whenever we strike or block, and when its HP hits 0, it will disappear forever. The only exceptions are default weapons, and even they will remain in a weakened, broken state once they hit 0 HP. To prevent this from happening, we'll have to regularly top their health off with repair powder, which we currently have only one of. Which means we'll be spending a lot of time listening to incessant beeping when our weapons are low on health. And even when healing them, we have to open up the menu and manually use repair powder on our weapon. Or we would, except the beeping and our character's constant battle cries can be toggled, and we can actually place up to 9 repair powders into one of our active item slots, so we can heal without having to open a menu. Your focus is on managing your weapon's health, your own health because enemies do hit hard, and making sure you gather as many resources as possible to make the next floor just a little bit easier. Each enemy we do kill will get our weapon some experience we can use to level it up for a meager increase in stats. We can temporarily boost our weapon by putting attachments onto it. Small stat slabs, element boosting jewels, or rare gems that will increase several stats at once. Leveling up bakes those stat bonuses permanently into whatever it was attached to, and reopens those slots for further buffing. Even a weapon found early can end up becoming something incredibly special this way. A smart strategy is to build up our default weapon to its 5th level. When it reaches +5, we can transform it into something called a Synth Sphere. This is a special attachment that carries 60% of its old stats. And thanks to it being our default weapon, we can equip our new dagger with our old one, giving it a large increase in stats until we can find something better. On the 4th floor, we encounter some xylophone enthusiasts we deal with easily, and then get jumped by their leader. Duels are rad. Quick-time event battles that break up regular gameplay that reward perfect execution with a special gem. There's no game over for failing them, and they always allow you to leave and come back whenever you feel like trying again. A little further in, we run into the leathered-up man from the prologue, who demands the Atlamillia and begins interrogating Tone.
How do you feel about cat girls?
Well, I kinda prefer humans.
Tone ends up eating a blast that leaves him at the man's mercy, but only because he was trying to protect a cat that had wandered into the dungeon. This amuses the villain enough that he throws a potion at him and leaves, wanting to see how this will play out. Kitty gets trapped in an atla for us to collect, and then we see that the way forward is blocked by a gap. Tone is unwilling to jump, so we head back to the surface to begin putting the pieces we've collected together. Atla we've gathered are used in the game's Georama system. It's a simple but satisfying city builder that splits our collected atla into 2 groups. Structures that can be placed in the game world, and pieces that we can attach onto them. Anything we attach to a structure will immediately be reflected by its in-world model. People work the same way, adding them to their homes so we can interact with them. Some locations will have blocked off question marks that require us to speak to the residents to find out what specialty item their home is missing. And the game doesn't allow us to attach any part to a structure that doesn't belong there. Completely finishing a structure gives us a reward. Sometimes it's just a bonus, and other times it's needed for story progression, alongside a cutscene that fleshes out the people we help. On top of that, every resident will have a special request for what they want for their home. Sometimes they want to face the rising sun, sometimes they want to live far away from the person they hate most. And satisfying these for an entire area will net us some very important bonuses. For Tone, we're able to put his broken home back together with the kitten we saved in the dungeon. The cat hangs out upstairs, and we're able to give it the potion the mystery man handed us, causing our furry friend to become a furry friend. Zhao is our second party member, and our first range fighter, using slingshots in combat. Her only real use is in crossing gaps at the moment, since she's a little squishy, with her single point of defense and low HP. Range weapons also do more damage the closer they are to the enemy, meaning the game encourages placing her into danger for more reward. We're able to make it to the lowest floor, but the final fight of a dungeon will always be locked behind Georama progression. Dran's Windmill's completion reward will have it spit out the key to speak with its namesake. Unfortunately, he's been bewitched by the Dark Genie. Dran keeps flying out of reach, having us switch between our 2 characters so we can knock him down with Zhao and have Tone lay into him. Beaten full of sense, Dran apologizes and offers us a ride out of the depths of the dungeon. He tells us that we might find a way to seal the Dark Genie by contacting the Moon people who had done so in the past. Their home is hidden close to the neighboring village of Matataki, so he hands us a magical map to take us there. We say our goodbye to all of our friends, to our mom,
If you see your father out there, please kill him.
and teleport off. Matataki Village is dry and unpleasant. It's so bad that Treant, the local deity, has shriveled up so we can't ask where the Moon People's village is hidden. The only sign of life that we see is a boy in a bear skin that we follow to his treehouse. He flashes his red velvet panties at us before challenging us to a duel. He gives a few excuses why he lost and runs off, but not before giving his name, Goro. He also dropped an earring here that we'll be needing soon. If you want to make any headway on our quest, we'll need to start delving into the nearby Wise Owl Forest, our second dungeon, and the worst, because it ignores rules that the game just got finished setting up. Instead of one gate key, the forest has three: a rock, a berry, and a nut. We still only need one of them, but it's random which is needed to open the way. Every time the wrong item is used, we have to sit and watch the owl slowly shake his head at us. And then we try the second item, and he does it again. And it will feel like this is happening on every single floor. It sucks, and I hate it. We managed to make it to a large open room that screams duel. And then we encounter a barrier that we can't get past, with a large neon sign telling us that we need to recruit a new party member. As we start rebuilding Matataki Village, our first task is connecting the river, which will revive the sleeping treant, who we can't understand since he's speaking some godless language. Remembering the earring, we slap it on and it does the most magic we've seen all game by turning those guttural animal sounds into real words. Treant's grateful for us saving them and gives us a reward in the form of the Serpent Sword. He also tells us about Goro and how he's closed his heart off ever since his father, Fudo, disappeared. It'll take something big in order to get him to open up and join us, so we set off building what homes we can. The people are kind, and almost all of them have a story about the greatness of Fudo, with the town bard serenading us about it. And he gives us a flute that he warns not to play where snakes might hear. So, we have a snake summoning flute and a snake slaying sword, so what we do next is fishing. A JRPG is not a JRPG if there isn't an underdeveloped, frustrating fishing game. And we picked up a rod back in our hometown that we can attach bait to. Some are sold in stores, but early on, most of it will be found in dungeons, either in treasure chests or dropped by enemies. Any fish caught will net us some points we can spend on different items. It's not exactly a fast process, though. In most areas, there will be an NPC that offers a monster slaying quest that can be in any of the dungeons we've unlocked so far, and another that offers fishing quests. The former gives us a target number of enemies to kill, and the latter will give us a specific size or number of fish to gather. These fishing quests easily give enough to pick up one of the stat-boosting gems, and I'll be coming back to this for more later. For now, we venture back into the same wolf den we dueled in earlier and towards a large cave. We play our flute and, unsurprisingly, are confronted by a giant white serpent. We're ready though because we have the serpent sword. Oh, I forgot to equip the... So we equip the serpent sword and start the duel. For our trouble, we get a skull necklace that once belonged to Fudo, which we bring to his son. In a flash of light, his ghost appears and tells his son what happened. He had been wasting away because of an illness, and didn't want that to be his end. Instead, he challenged the servant to battle so he could die a warrior's death, being slowly crushed while all his friends watched. He encourages his son to fight, to save the world, and Goro decides he's gonna give it a shot.
I know it's been tough, but my dad's gone too.
My dad died. Yours left.
Welcome to the party.
Goro can open the closed barrier by hitting the switch with his mallet. In terms of gameplay, he's kind of terrible starting off. His attacks have no reach whatsoever, so only by abusing his charge attack's iframes is he even able to get close enough to most enemies without eating a few hits himself. This is also where we see one downside to the gameplay. Collecting Atlet will always demand we switch back to Tone, since he's the only one that can interact with them. There's never really a reason to switch to anyone else aside from their traversal gimmicks, which makes it easier for them to fall further behind our hero in strength. The bottom floor of the dungeon has us using a seed we picked up from rebuilding Matataki, but just to twist the knife a little more, we need a second item to actually access the boss. An item that we can accidentally use, because this entire area was designed to annoy you. Just as before, the Fairy King pops in to tell us that the Dark Genie has taken over his mind, so we need to knock some sense into him. He apologizes for trying to squish us, and tells us that the Moon People's village is just a little further in. Our arrival is enough to send the hooded figures into a panic, and trying to climb up to their chief's house earns us a concussion. When we wake up, we discover the cute little guys plan on using some enhanced interrogation techniques on us. Before some human rights violations can happen, another hooded creature bursts in demanding we be freed, and we're able to explain ourselves. They do know of the magic that sealed the Dark Genie, but their time on the Earth has drained their power away. We need to go to their homeland if we want to find anyone capable of using it, which means our next destination is the Moon. Or it would be, but they lost the keys to the ship that would take us there. The Moon Orb apparently got mixed into their shipment of fruit to the merchant city of Queens, so we set off to find the missing treasure. Queens is the biggest and emptiest place we visited so far, but it appears that the harbor survived the destruction. There's even a person there, a merchant named Rando, who invites us in and shows us hospitality, and then starts yelling about foreigners, so really, it's like we never left home.
Thanks for the tea.
He does have a guess as to where we can find the Moon Orb. The dungeon of the area is actually the storehouse for the city, the wrecked remains of their former queen's ship beneath the sea. We're given a submarine to take us there, and sent on our way. Around here is when the elemental affinity of our weapon really starts mattering, as some enemies will outright resist all damage if we hit them with the wrong type. Having developed our weapons properly, most will have reached the point where they can evolve. This changes their appearance, increases the caps on most of their stats, and sometimes even adds a new ability to the weapon.
Hail Satan!
And are capable of one or two shotting most enemies. Despite how strong that might seem, most enemies can do the same to us, even if we're gathering what we need to increase our character's low stats. Speaking of, all stat-boosting items are found in miracle chests that appear around or inside structures we place in the villages we restore as we gather more Atla. There are fruits of Eden that increase our health by 10, and gourds that increase a character's thirst. It drains the longer we are in dungeons, and if we run out, begins sapping our HP. But there are pools all over dungeons that restore all health and thirst, so it rarely ever matters. Most important are the special defense-raising items that are unique to each character. Eating one will increase a character's defense anywhere from 5 to 7 points, meaning if you want the strongest party possible, you're going to be saves coming after each of these to ensure you get that full 7. The dungeon itself is much less frustrating, since it goes back to only needing the one gate key, and we'll quickly arrive on a floor where we'll encounter another barrier, telling us it's time to expand our party. Town building has gotten more complicated, with people asking to be on different levels of elevation, roads, and proximity to multiple other locations, forcing us to spend more time to get it just right. The man in charge of town named King rewards us for restoring his home by offering us a lamp, but Tone butterfingers it, accidentally unleashing Ruby. Despite her occupation, she makes it immediately clear that she's the one in charge, and King and his men don't hesitate to throw Tone under the bus.
I can make any of your wishes come true.
Can you bring my dad home?
Any wish other than that?
Just join the party or whatever.
Ruby is another ranged fighter, like Zhao, but exclusively using magic. The gates she opens all require a specific element to be used on the crystals sealing them, so whatever weapon she's using needs to swap to match it. Normally that would mean having to open up the menu and manually switch over to it each and every time, but thanks to our mod, weapon elements can be swapped with one of the directional buttons. The bottommost floor of the shipwreck has us finding a music box, so we're going to need to explore the rest of the town to see if we can find its key. Thankfully, we have some help in our search in the form of the town's fortune teller. She'll use her powers to let us know what the Dark Genie is up to. And, even give us a glimpse of the Moon Orb that we hear was picked up by someone. We have to finish the church to get the last piece of the puzzle. The priest telling us that no weddings happen there because of a curse placed by their late queen. She had intended to marry and run away with a commoner, but on the day of the ceremony, he left her at the altar, and she, handling it really well, threw herself into the sea. Hearing this story gives us a chance to ask the fortune teller about the man that left the queen at the altar. And we see Rando's store, where we can now pick up the key to the music box, with a merchant nowhere in sight. Opening the box takes us to what looks like the church, where the queen reveals that in her despair, she turned goth and sexy.
No one would ever love a hideous, wretched person like me.
Now, hold on a second. Come on!
She begins by summoning a barrier that we need to crack open with our first 3 party members, but all of them become useless once it's down. We have to swap to Ruby after this and unleash as much punishment as we can, as she'll quickly bring her shield back up. The Queen does a ton of damage, can inflict freeze to keep us from dodging, and has a lot of wide range attacks that make her a huge step up in threat compared to previous bosses. With our victory, she says she'll never let go of her bitterness. When Rando walks in, he had lived the last few hundred years thanks to something called the Life Stone, and apologizes, having used us to get to see the Queen again. He hands us the moon orb that he was hiding this whole time, and then, makes up with the woman he left at the altar,
So why exactly weren't you at our wedding?
and then immediately kills himself. Returning to the moon people, they use the moon orb to summon the moon ship so we can finally go to the moon. Nothing happens. Because, of course, there's a problem in the temple where it rests. The mayor forces us to take along one of his townspeople, a cowardly fellow named Theo, and we set off for the desert. We arrive at the temple and immediately meet Ungaga, greatest of the Sand Warriors, who survived the destruction of his village. His spirit was crushed by the loss of everyone he knew, and Theo, wanting to do some good, says he'll stick around to cheer him up. The Sun and Moon Temple is loaded with enemies that are incredibly tough, with every hit we land eating huge amounts of our weapon's HP. Whether we hit or they guard it, it means playing as Tone or Goro requires a lot more care, since their main weapon breaking is hours of investment lost. As we descend the floors, we'll see moments where our cloaked friend tries to cheer up Ungaga. Theo manages to put some hope into him, as the main reason for the warrior's woes are the loss of the woman he loves. Ungaga thinks she's dead, but Theo mentions that she's probably fine, and that Tone will rescue her. Hitting the party check for the dungeon, we take down a couple of goofy golems and see our path barred by a black mist, an inky fog, a dark cloud. Muskalaska isn't as large as Queen's, and there's no elevation to consider, but it has the most difficult request to satisfy in the game. All the townspeople have a totem outside their homes, matching up to one of 3 faces on pillars we'll place. This requires a lot more consideration in where we place structures, and pulling up a guide here just to avoid the frustration is completely understandable. The more pressing problem is getting Ungaga over his depression, which we'll do by reassembling the 3 sisters' home. This immediately gets us dragged into family drama, as the eldest doesn't understand why the village's hero chose her homely little sister Makara. Ungaga tells a story of how he was stung by a scorpion, and the eldest sister ran off to get him help. Well, Makara slapped him and sucked on his titty until she passed out. Everyone is satisfied by this explanation, and we get our 5th party member, who kind of strikes a weird middle ground between Goro and Tone. He hits incredibly slow, but he has enough reach to make attacking safe. The bigger issue is that his default weapon is so weak that until we put some real work in, he really blows. We can't just ignore our worst party members either, because of limited zones. These can speed up how quickly our thirst drains, or even have our weapons lose experience when they kill enemies. But most often, they just force us to use someone other than Tone. We're gonna need to do some grinding to improve, which means fishing is at its most useful now, since Muskalaska's pawn is home to the Baron Garion. It gives several hundred points for each we fish out, so we can quickly upgrade our weapons to nearly their final forms. The question is whether or not it's worth trying to catch the thing, as it only appears at dusk, and even then, its spawn rate is abysmal. All the time spent starting and stopping the fishing minigame could just be spent dungeon diving instead. Finishing up Muskalaska will get us 2 keys we need for opening the final floor of the dungeon. It also gets us a decent weapon for Ungaga to help jumpstart his usefulness if we choose not to grind, as well as some interesting words from the village chief. She mentions having seen someone with eyes like Tone's before, the only man that was strong enough to face her in her youth. There's even a golem here he helped create, which raises even more questions about what kind of man Tone's father was, and we do at least learn his name, Aga. The dungeon's boss has us fighting the king that was entombed there to protect the moonship. Like before, we'll need to swap to our new character to do any damage. He has the same barrier around him as in the dungeon, and while this is kind of annoying, our damage is so high we only have to land a few hits to end the fight. The ship itself is at least intact, but the whole temple starts to crumble, and Tone's forced to run to get on it before he ends up the next mummy. This kicks off the game's final duel? It's the last in the entire game, and the easiest by a wide margin. This is after the entire Queens region not having included a single one, with the final reward being one of the same gems we've probably farmed dozens of at this point. It turns what was once a highlight into a massive disappointment. We're at least finally on our way to the moon, and Theo looks on, before revealing that he and all the other moon people are actually gross and ugly. Instead of mystics, it appears that the moon people have turned to technology, with factories and cell phones and even their own version of the internet. If we want to get our questions answered about the Dark Genie being sealed, we need to go find a leader of Yellow Drop. So all we need to do is head into the moon sea. Via cannon. But before that, it's time for side quests. Starting all the way back at No Ruin Village, we can get a piece of candy from one of our neighbors. We use this to lure a child in Matataki and receive a leaf that we trade in Queens for some beauty product. This gets handed in for a fertility statue that we give to a horny rabbit, and receive the single greatest attachment in the game, the sun, which at this point isn't a huge reward, but it's at least something. Some much greater rewards can be gotten by completing the 2 side quests that the enhanced mod adds for us. The first requires that we listen to a bunch of obtuse clues from NPCs sprinkled throughout every town. These refer to specific items we'll need to organize into the first 4 slots of our inventory, and then speak to this rabbit in Yellow Drops. If we do it correctly, we'll receive a permanent magical crystal. This comes with all of the effects of one we'd find in a dungeon, and also replaces any found in chests, meaning every dungeon floor now comes with more loot. The second request requires us to complete a back floor, which are special areas filled with rare loot and powered up enemies, with every dungeon having a unique way of getting us there, like tram, boat, vor, sled, and finally, these are useful early game, but for the Moon Sea onwards, it's a lot of extra risk for things that could otherwise be attained through fishing. Still, clearing one of these out isn't that much of a task, but we also have to do it with only Tone, using his default dagger that has hard stat caps so we can't cheese it to be even halfway decent, versus enemies which, even if we save scum to juice his defense up to max, can 1 or 2 shot him. It's an obnoxious challenge that cannot possibly have a reward good enough to justify doing it, so we're going to skip it. And then I remembered, I'm stupid. For all our troubles, we get the other special item, a map. This again replaces the dungeon item permanently, and will make getting through floors faster. It's not completely game-changing, or really worth what it took to get it, but it's better than only having bragging rights. We run into the boss of Yellow Drop, and he explains that his ship wasn't really a ship, but a giant mech that exploded mid-flight. We ask him about sealing the genie, and find out that he and all the other moon people traded their magical abilities for science, and have no interest in going back. Osmond joins us now, and he's a flying rabbit with a blicky. There are gaps in dungeons that only he can fly over, but he can also do the same over the shorter ones we previously had to switch to Zhao for. This means not having to sit through a several second long animation, so our catgirl will not be seeing much use after this. The Coliseum fight sees us facing off with an alcoholic minotaur who can and will get crunk and break us in half, so it's best to smash as many of the barrels as we can before beating him to death. This gets us our power source, so we can begin assembling our mech. And as we do, we'll meet Osmond's unpaid interns, who he convinces to put their lives on the line, with promises of glory and emotional manipulation. With our Sun Giant assembled, we can finally set off for Dark Heaven Castle, and put an end to things for good. The Dark Genie is waiting for us. He's destroyed the world almost twice now, but we've got our fully powered Sun Giant to face him in what is totally the final battle. The whole thing screams that it was intended to be another duel, but either they ran out of time or changed their minds at the last minute. Either way, it feels like a missed opportunity, even as we defeat the Dark Genie. And then we see Colonel Flag. He's holding a dead rat, which, as it turns out, was actually the genie we've been fighting the entire game. and just by absorbing some of its power, was strong enough to pass for the genuine article. But still, we've got our mech, and he can't be that much stronger than what we just fought. Using just a fraction of its power was enough to break Colonel Flag's body, and the genie slips away after having put an end to the heroes. Or so he thinks, but Dran swoops in to rescue us, and we push on into the castle, where we run into the leathered man from the intro, Seda. Despite how obviously important he is to the story, he was missing from the game after No Rune, and only now does he explain why. The Dark Genie was born from him, and there was nothing he could do to kill it, so he traveled 400 years into the future to acquire the Atlamillia. He's given up on that, so he's decided to go all in on helping Tone. But the genie wants to use his body as a vessel as a replacement for Colonel Flag. He struggles to resist until he finds a solution.
I've got a fix for this.
With the last of his strength, he opens a portal to the past, and we charge into the final dungeon of the game, the Gallery of Time. Each floor takes us further back in time, and we'll see the ruined castle gradually be restored to its original state. The Atla we collect are also different, as we aren't assembling buildings, but Seda's memories of how the Dark Genie came to be. He was prince of his kingdom, and in a short span of time, fell in love with a woman named Sophia, lost his father and was forced to become king, and found himself in a losing war with the West. Desperate to save his people and his love, he made a deal with a witch that gave him immense power. He won the war, but an assassin sent for him in the aftermath killed Sophia instead. The magical powers he possessed went out of control because of his rage and sorrow, birthing the Dark Genie. We should be ready to face him at the bottom, since we've got an ultimate weapon for each character. The big benefit of these would normally be their high stat caps, but now there's even more reason to get them, as they come with unique abilities, like Tone's Chronicle Sword doing damage to all enemies when he lands a hit. Another bonus of our modded experience is the ability to get the Flapping Duster, the key to the back floors of the Gallery of Time. Because of a glitch in the original North American version, the item wouldn't spawn normally. All of Seda's memories gathered, we're able to travel to 400 years ago, to the night of Sophia's murder. The Dark Genie is aware of our meddling in time, and rather than try to stop us, is curious to see how well we'll do. We sneak in and watch Seda and Sophia have a quiet moment together. And then a second Sophia comes rushing in, both of them beginning to argue over who the real Sophia is.
You have to believe me.
You have to believe me.
I don't sound like that. You know me.
It seems like one of those situations that could easily be resolved by asking questions, but...
I'll put the cat ears on.
Fiend!
Tone tries to dive in to help, but gets paralyzed by magic, forcing Sophia to...
Why are you so...
Having failed to change history, the king flies into a rage, impales Sophia's killer, and hurls him off the balcony. Seda thinks Tone's just another assassin, and before we can explain, fully loses control, leading to the birth of the Dark Genie.
Oh no, he's hot!
The fight begins with us avoiding being fingered to death, with our weapons element either having to match the hands or have none at all when we hit them. Tone makes pretty short work of this phase, and we move on to the next, where he begins firing lasers from his forehead at us, forcing us to swap to a ranged fighter. The only frustrating thing about this whole fight is him being able to flap his wings and hit what seems like the entire field, but it's still not enough to keep us from caving his face in to start the final phase. Transforming into a cosmic horror, the Dark Genie's laser hits harder than ever, and now he has goons to get in our way as we try to land hits on his core. There's only one strategy at this point, kill or be killed, and we're going to make all of our grinding worth it. Though we manage to kill the genie, the Fairy King returns to tell us that it's only temporary. As long as Seda's hate exists, it'll just come back. It's here that he reveals the Atlamillia's true power, to call back the souls of the dead, which we can then use to resurrect Sophia and truly put a stop to the Dark Genie's existence.
Could we do something about the gaping knife wound in my back?
We return to our own time, to the night that No Rune Village burned. It's as though our adventure had never even happened, complete with Zhao returning to her cat form. There's no proof that the amazing journey that Tone and his friends went on ever happened. No celebrations, no thanks, nothing. It's over. Or is it? There's one final challenge left for us, the Demon Shaft. 100 floors and filled with enemies dozens of times more difficult than anything we faced up to this point. The permanent map and magic crystal we got earlier are finally showing their worth, as it makes navigating the floors go that much faster. There's plenty of treasure, but at this point we don't need any of it. Venturing into the back floors is even less recommended, because almost every enemy can 2 or even one-shot even our toughest party members. Regular enemies have as much or even more HP than bosses, and are so tough that cheesing becomes the only way to move forward. Having Osmond use a poison machine gun is going to be our safest strategy, since it doesn't wear off, does percentage-based damage, and comes at no risk of getting bodied. Now, a fact of JRPGs is that their 100-floor bonus dungeons always suck, and this one isn't really breaking that trend. We even have an HP-bloated super boss waiting for us at the end, Pendragon. He hits like a truck and has multiple phases, but at least he doesn't have any gimmicks forcing us to swap characters. But to really understand why this fight means anything, we need Steve. Steve is a talking slingshot we can find for Zhao. A lot of what he says is just fluff, but against Pendragon he says something different. He makes a point of asking about who the knight is, and mentions that Tone might recognize the boss. The designs of his swords also mirror a weapon we can pick up called Aga's Sword, named after Tone's father. So after saving the world and dragging ourselves through this slog of a dungeon, it seems we finally found our absentee father. And then we kill him. And all that remains of our father is our inheritance, the Chronicle 2. It's the strongest weapon we can acquire, and serves no purpose at this point, but whatever, Dad's gone. And we finally, truly finish the game. I started this by saying that Dark Cloud's simplicity is its strength, and it is. But as the game goes on, things like duels that broke up the mashing heavy gameplay, and city building which made the world feel more alive, end up being forgotten, taking the game from simple to bare bones. Its story of a boy saving the world isn't badly told, and there's at least enough connective tissue between the different areas to try to pull some meaning from it. Everyone Tone encounters lost something and hurt others, or themselves, in response. Goro shut himself off from everyone because of his dad's death, Lysia cursed her kingdom after being abandoned by Rando, and Seida's loss was what caused the Dark Genie in the first place. Tone has his entire village get blown up, and every person he goes to for help lets him down in one way or another. Even when he saves the world, it's to no fanfare, and that's kind of the point. You want to fix something? Help someone? Help yourself? It's going to be long, it's going to be annoying, it's going to be disappointing. But you do it anyway, because otherwise, nothing gets better. I understand this might not have been the purest experience of Dark Cloud, but the enhanced mod is the perfect Vanilla Plus experience. If I had to go back to opening the menu every time I wanted to use repair powder, I'd probably... Tons of mods lose sight of what made the thing they're changing great to begin with, so I hope everyone that had a hand in this understands how incredible they are. I've included a link in the description for anyone interested in trying it out, even if it's your first time playing. Thanks for watching. There's gonna be more soon, and with less of a wait next time. Until then, though, get the hell out.
Hi, Mom!
Welcome home.
I saved the world!
That's nice.
I also killed Dad!
I've never been prouder.